Hey everyone, welcome to the Canine Culture Podcast, where we talk about everything dog. Q&As with veterinarian professionals, rescue operators, everyday topics. We cover everything dog on this podcast. So make sure you subscribe to the Canine Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media on both Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again for listening. Now here's that next episode. All right, welcome everyone to episode 14 of the Canine Culture Podcast. This is your host, Brittany, and we have a special guest on today to talk about animal control and debunking the myths and learning more. So welcome to the show, Morgan.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So tell everyone a little bit about what you do for a living.
Okay. How long is this podcast again? How much time do I have?
As long as you want.
All right. So I have a pretty interesting job. I work for the Humane Society of the United States, and what my team does is respond to natural and man-made disasters. So what that means is when there's a hurricane or a wildfire or a tornado, we are some of the people that respond to that. So that's the natural component of disasters, but the man-made piece comes in with large-scale cruelty. So sometimes that are hoarding situations or dog fighting, puppy mills, that type of stuff. And we are brought in when it's more than what the local animal control is capable of handling. They will call us and we come out to assist them because, you know, many animal controls have a very small, limited capacity, and an influx in one day of 100 or 200 animals would completely put them over capacity, and they would not be able to care for that many. So that is just one of the ways we assist. We go in and help take some of that burden off of them so they can continue caring for the animals that are already in their care.
So the topic of animal control came up when Morgan and I were at dinner, and I said something to the extent that was stereotypical of animal control and how they seem like the bad guys. And she's like, no, you're completely wrong. They're not at all the bad guys. We need them. And so I just need to be educated on the topic, as do many other people, because people who know I'm recording this today, same thing. Why would you talk about animal control? They're terrible people. We need to get rid of animal control. So you can probably answer this question. What exactly is animal control?
Yeah. So I guess actually, can I give you just like a little background first to maybe help it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So we all know the media is really good at what they do, right? If you think back to when you were a little kid and you watched, I think it's Lady and the Tramp that has animal control officers in it.
Yeah.
And they were picking up dogs and sending them to the pound, and they were the bad guys and scary. That is the view that I think a lot of people still have of animal control officers. So way back in the day, animals were, well, they're still considered property, but many of them were just free roaming dogs and cats and everything else. And animal controls got started as a way to just keep populations under control because, as you can imagine, if animals were just running around loose, they were breeding like crazy. And they were actually paid usually per animal that they caught. So they were highly incentivized to catch lots of animals. So over the years, that has greatly shifted and evolved, and animal control now exists in a capacity to basically be the the protectors of the animals in the community. So they're the ones that when there's a neighbor sees someone beating their dog, they're going to call animal control. Those are the people that are going to step in to help the animals. They investigate reports of cruelty. They investigate things like what we get involved with at my job, like large-scale cruelty, all of that kind of stuff. And they're the ones that are really experts in the law in their jurisdiction as it applies to animal protection. And they are the ones that work to enforce it. So not at all the bad guy. They're actually there because they love animals and want to help them. And I'm sure it'll come up at some point, but oftentimes their hands are tied by the laws. So I think that's part of why people get frustrated and think that they're no good. They don't care. I've heard so many times people say, well, I called animal control and they didn't do anything. Which of course is frustrating if you are, an average citizen and you're witnessing something that you think is unkind or unfair to an animal. You want action taken, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're bound by the laws the same way police officers are. So they can only act within whatever the legal system allows. You're the attorney here, so you can talk about that better than I can. But
no legal advice on this podcast.
But no, seriously, they their hands often are tied, and it's like, trust me when I say it's more frustrating for them to, in some situations, be powerless and not be able to remove an animal from a tough situation.
So, with respect to exactly what they do, so if I see my neighbor beating their dog regularly, or, it gets pretty hot here in the summer, so if they were to leave their dog on a chain with no water, is animal control, is that my very first call, you think?
Yeah. And if it wasn't your first call, like if you were to call the local humane society or nonprofit, odds are that they're going to direct you to whatever animal control is in the city that you live in. Because nonprofit organizations typically, not always, they typically don't have any jurisdiction or authoritative power in the community. There are instances in some cities or counties where nonprofits like humane societies or SPCAs will actually get the animal control contract because maybe there's not an infrastructure for a separate, solely dedicated animal control. But in bigger cities like Jacksonville, often there's animal control and then one or more large nonprofits like we have here with Animal Care and Protective Services downtown, and then Jacksonville Humane Society on Beach Boulevard. So yes, you would want to call them, report what you're seeing, and then they have to investigate. And again, they're kind of bound by whatever the laws are. So here in Jacksonville, we do have a tethering law, and I should probably have done my homework before I came on here. But
I didn't even know we had a tethering law.
Yeah, we have a tethering law, and I believe that, oh gosh, nobody quote me on this, but I believe that if a dog is to be tethered outside, they have to have access to fresh water. They have to have access to some sort of shelter. So in the summer, they need something that will provide them with shade. In the winter, they need something that can keep them warm. And then I think, if I remember correctly, I think that here in Jacksonville, at least, they actually are not permitted to be left unsupervised on the chain. So the idea is that gives animal control officers room to enforce the law. Like if a dog is just being left out 24/7, then that person is in violation of the law. So it gives them something that they can actually act on.
So how does the investigation go? So I'm like, hey, this dog's on its chain 24/7. Do they have to come out like multiple times? Can they come out just once? Or how does that work?
So, I feel bad. I don't want to say the wrong thing, and I'm not certain. I think it probably depends on what it is they're investigating. So, if they come out and they see something so egregious that it's in violation of whatever the laws in that area are, then they can act on it. If it's not egregious enough or they don't see any evidence of what you're telling them, then the odds are they're going to have to initiate some sort of investigation or issue a compliance order. And that's something that a lot of animal control officers have to do pretty regularly. So what that means is, say, for example, they get called out to a home and there's a really emaciated dog there. Mm-hmm. They may issue a compliance order stating that the owner has to, I don't know, increase their food or take them to the vet or something, and they'll put a time frame on that, and then they'll come check back in to see if it's been remedied. If it hasn't been remedied, then they have then it becomes actionable. They can remove the dog. They can do something like that. Mm-hmm. But typically the owners have to be provided an opportunity to amend whatever violation or whatever it is they're doing or not doing that's violating the law.
And then aside from violations, when I think of animal control, I do think of like Lady and the Tramp with the big truck and they throw
Yeah.
the dogs in. But
Yeah.
I mean, they do that too, right? Like if they see a wandering dog, would they just go ahead and pick them up, put them in the tank and take them downtown?
Um, so again, I feel like everything I'm going to say is it depends.
Yeah.
But
Typical legal answer.
I know. For the most part, and this is not going to be true in smaller, under-resourced communities, but in bigger communities that have more of a budget for the animal control, the officers are usually at a minimum going to have a microchip scanner. So if they find a loose dog, usually the first thing they're going to do is scan it for microchips, see if it has an owner. They may drive around the area and just ask people like, hey, do you recognize this dog? Because if they can reunite it with its owner and not take it to the shelter, that's a win all around. Every time an animal ends up in the county shelter or whatever it may be, or the animal control facility, there's costs associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a burden on the staff. All of the other animals are there. Every animal that gets added in is just that many more resources that are being used up. So whenever they can keep animals out of the shelter, that's the ideal. But yeah, if they weren't to find the owner, wasn't microchipped or registered, then typically they're going to take them to the animal control facility so that the owner, if they're looking for it, is able to find it and be reunited with it.
So here in Jacksonville, where would you go if your dog got loose or your dog was gone? I only know about the Humane Society.
Uh-huh.
Where would you go to see if your dog was at animal control? Like, do they have their own separate website with like a booking page?
Yeah. So they have their own website that you can find. You can navigate through the city's website to get to it. And then I believe, and I'm terrible at social media, but I'm pretty sure that they have their own, Facebook and all of that, where they'll post found dogs. And then there's also a lot of other resources. There are quite a few different like lost and found social media pages. And a lot of times those will share pictures and descriptions of dogs and cats that are brought into animal control as strays, just in hopes of getting them in as many different platforms and places as they can, so that if someone is looking for them, they're able to find them, because nobody knows all of the resources, right? So if you can get it in as many places as possible, you're going to increase the chances that the right people see the picture.
And do you know how long they normally hold a dog, or what's the policy for Jacksonville, if you know it, is with respect to, is there like a 7 to 14 day stray hold, or like how do they do it?
Yeah, so I think that in Jacksonville, I believe it's a 7-day stray hold. And what that means is that for 7 days, the animal cannot be put up for adoption. They have to just be held in the shelter, cared for. If they come in injured or sick, they're going to be treated medically for that. But they can't be available to the public for adoption for, I believe it's 7 days. So at the 7-day mark, if no one has come forward to claim the dog or cat, then they can become available for adoption, at which point anyone in the public can adopt them.
Okay. And what are some things that people can do to help their local animal control?
There's a lot of different things. So you can always go and volunteer. Animal controls are pretty much always going to be funded by the city or county, which means that they typically have a very small budget. Mm-hmm. So they typically don't have a lot of staff, and they really do often rely on volunteers to do some of the extra stuff, such as walking the dogs and playing with them and giving them toys and enrichment that the regular staff, like, they're so busy just cleaning and feeding and medicating the animals that they don't have time to get to those extra things. And as I'm sure you can imagine, staying in a shelter is not a positive experience for any animal. Right. So when volunteers are able to come in and walk the dogs or pet the cats or pass out treats and toys, like, it does go a long way in helping their mental well-being while they're stuck in the shelter. Mm-hmm. You can also make donations. Money's always good, but you can donate your old towels, your old blankets. If you have a dog that decided he doesn't like the brand of dog food you've been buying and you just bought a giant new bag, take that to animal control. They'll use it. You can help them with their social media. I mean, whatever your skill set is, odds are there's a way that it would be helpful to your local animal control.
Okay. And then I think we've covered like most of the topics, and, we've explained what they do, how we can help. Is there anything else that you kind of wish people knew, or something you encounter daily that you're like, man, I just wish people knew this about animal control?
Yeah. Oh man, there's so much I could say. In my eyes, they're kind of the unsung heroes. Mm-hmm. They work for so little pay. It's kind of offensive really how low of pay they work for, but they're drawn to the field because they're so compassionate, because they love animals so much, because they want them to be protected and cared for. And they do so many amazing things that people don't ever hear about. Here in Jacksonville, the animal control officers will pass out dog houses. They'll, share resources with the community. We have some awesome low-cost spay and neuter clinics and low-cost, like high-quality vet care clinics here that people don't know about. And so the officers will share that information with them. They'll drive people to and from appointments. They'll do all kinds of things to help their community, but you don't really ever hear about it. You kind of just have the old Lady and the Tramp picture in your mind. And I think another thing that people don't think about is just how hard their job is. Mm-hmm. They see the worst of the worst. In my experiences, I've seen things that I wouldn't wish on anyone to have to experience. It's just extreme suffering sometimes, torture, all of that. And these officers are choosing to be in a profession that puts them in a position to see that on a regular basis. And they can't always do something about it. Like sometimes the law is not on their side and the person is acting just within the bounds of the law. Mm-hmm. So they can't do anything about it, but they know it's not right.
Right.
So I think, for so many reasons, I think they're unsung heroes, and I wish that people would, go hug an animal control officer. Can we make that like a hashtag or something?
That's a thing. Hug an animal control officer. We might have to shorten it, maybe an abbreviation. If you guys want shirts, I'll make shirts.
Yes.
So I think this has been really educational for me, especially because you think of the rescues doing good work. Yeah. Shelters, 50-50. Sometimes some of the shelters, you're like, hey, they're doing a great job. And other shelters, even if they're doing a great job, maybe they've gotten a bad rap, or they're a kill shelter, which we won't dig into that today.
Oh, girl, have me back. We'll talk about that.
But I mean, you never hear anything positive about animal control ever. And quite frankly, you don't ever see it. Like, I don't even think I see a lot of the advocates in the community sharing it on social media. I have never even shared anything. Yeah. And so I think that this is eye-opening for me, and I'm hoping to eventually volunteer with them and give them some more credibility and even some more resources. Yeah,
I would love that for them. They're really awesome people. I spend a lot of time down there. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, and you might see some sad stuff, but just know that the people are doing everything they can to help that, underweight dog or fearful cat. Like, they're doing their best.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and teaching all of us about the unsung heroes, animal control officers.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, you guys will hear from Morgan again on a future episode because she is the dog guru. So
I don't know
thank you
that.
So much for being on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Canine Culture Podcast. Please make sure you subscribe to the Canine Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media. If you have any recommendations, any topics that you'd like to hear, if you know of any guests that would be good for the show, or if you yourself want to be a guest, please reach out to us. Send us an email at canineculturepodcast@gmail.com, or send us a direct message on social media. Thank you for listening, and please share this with any of your dog-loving friends.